Sonnet 138 by William Shakespeare. When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties. Thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best. Simply I credit her false speaking tongue. On both sides thus is simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she not she is unjust? And wherefore say not I that I am old? O love's best habit is in seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be. So, unlike the previous two sonnets that I discussed, for this sonnet I'm going to leave you the task of figuring out the rhyme scheme and the rhythm scheme. You've already gotten the tools to be able to do this. I'll talk you through the first two lines, but you should basically know unstressed, stressed. You should already have the A B A B B C, the A B A B B C B C quatrain rhyme pattern. You should have the unstressed, unstressed. When my love swears that she is made of truth. And if you read it in that kind of rhyme scheme and that rhythmic pattern, you should be able to figure out where the stresses lie. So I will spend most of the time talking then about the meaning rather than in the meter and in the rhyme, but you should be aware of how to do it. So you may actually want to make that kind of grid, the kind of grid that I made in the previous two sonnets. You may actually want to do that on your own for this sonnet as well. So let's go quatrain by quatrain. When my love swears that she's made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties. So the first quatrain begins with a series of paradoxes, right? His love is swearing that she is truthful, and yet the thing that she's swearing she's truthful about is the lies that she tells. And so that's a paradox, right? To swear that you're truthful, but truthful, the very things that you're swearing you're truthful about are actually all lies. So there is the juxtaposition between truth and lies. There is the juxtaposition between swearing something to kind of back up its validity, right? It's one thing to say that I love someone. It's another thing to say I swear I love someone, right? So the swearing kind of adds emphasis, and meanwhile, the adding of the emphasis is belied by the fact that not only is she lying about something, but she's making it worse by swearing about lying about something. The kind of paradoxes, the oppositions that we talk about, the truth and lies, continue in the rest of the lines as well. I do believe her, though I know she lies. So there is the juxtaposition between someone lying to you, and when someone lies to you, you don't when someone lies to you, you don't normally believe them. Right? Think back to the Raymond Carver story, right? When she lies to him in the Carver story, he doesn't know whether to believe her or not, right? So this would be a great poem if you were thinking about writing a poem. This poem and the Raymond Carver short story, The Lie, would be two great works of literature to put in a conversation with one another. But for the purposes of this poem, he knows that she lies. In other words, he knows not to believe her, and yet I do believe her. And so there's this oppositionality as well. And the oppositionality continues in the next line as well, that she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties. And so the reason why I do believe her, the reason why I seem to be unlearned in the world's false subtleties is so that she might think me some untutored youth. And so not only is she being untruthful to him, But there's some measure of deception on his part as well. He wants her to think that he's unlearned in the world's false subtle ties. And he wants her to consider him to be some untutored youth. And this word youth will show up prominently in the next stanza, right? Because the next quatrain, I should say, because the word youth here is connected to the word young over here, right? These two words are synonymous with one another. Over here, this word young helps us to explain why in quatrain 1 he wants her to think of him as some untutored youth. Why? Why would you want someone else to think that you're naive or untutored? Well, the reason perhaps has to do less with the word untutored and more with the word youth. Quatrain 2, thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young, here we go. Although she knows my days are past the best, simply I credit her false speaking tongue. On both sides thus is simple truth suppressed. And so, just as there is oppositionality, there's paradox in the first quatrain, there's that idea continues in the second quatrain as well. But the oppositionality is focused a little bit differently. Notice the emphasis in quatrain 2 is on him, right? These first two lines are about her looking at him, thus vainly thinking, or it's from his perspective, I should say, thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young. The vainly applies to him, right? The fact that she thinks that he's young, even though to be an untutored youth is a negative connotation. Meanwhile, to be thought young is a positive connotation. But these two words, youth and young, are used to different effects. In this line, untutored youth is normally seen as a negative perception of someone, and over here it's seen as positive. And the reason why he wants her to think him young is because it feeds into his vanity. He wants to be thought as someone young. And so we immediately, the fact is immediately established that he's not young, right? But he wants to be treated as if he is, even if it means associating him with naivety. Now, the interesting thing is she doesn't think that he's young, right? She's wise to the truth. She knows my days are past the best, right? And so we ask ourselves, why would she know that he's not young and yet still, why would she still think that he is young when she knows that he's not? And there's the juxtaposition here between the words thinks and the word knows, right? When you think of something, there is some element of uncertainty there. But when you know something, there's no element of uncertainty there. And so there's a oppositionality between the words thinks and knows. She says she thinks him young to feed into his vanity, but what she really knows is that his days are past the best. And so again, she's putting on a front, isn't she? And why is this dynamic going on? Well, these two lines should give us some clue. Simply, I credit her false speaking tongue. And this word simply goes back to this idea of some untutored youth. How does an untutored youth act? An untutored youth acts as a simpleton, right? Someone who is naive, right? And the word has a double connotation because simply can imply a simpleton, someone who's an untutored youth, but simply also can apply the fact that he's behaving as if he is learned in the world's false subtle ties, right? He's behaving in a simple kind of manner, and he gives credit to her false speaking tongue. In other words, she's feeding his vanity, and meanwhile, he is giving her credit for feeding his vanity. And what's the consequence of this? On both sides, thus is simple truth suppressed. Now notice the juxtaposition here. The juxtaposition here is between the word simple, right, and the word simply. Over here, simply is an act, right? He's acting as a simpleton. He's acting simply. But over here, the word simple is modifying the noun truth. On both sides, thus, is simple truth suppressed. What's the simple truth? Well, the simple truth is he's old and she's a liar. That's as simple as it gets, right? And yet the simple truth is suppressed on both sides. The fact that she's a liar and the fact that he is old is suppressed. So quatrain 2 kind of ends on an ominous note, right? Truth seems to be suppressed as quatrain 2 ends. But, and remember what I said before in one of the previous lectures, always pay attention to these transition words. Here the transition word is but. So we know that something's going to change. Something's going to be the opposite of what's been just stressed. So if simple truth is suppressed as quatrain 2 finishes, there's a but which is about to change the direction of the poem. Wherefore says she not, she is unjust. And this is interesting, right? Because as we talk about juxtapositions, notice what happens with the word not in quatrain 3. The word not appears twice, right? Once in this line and once again in this line. Notice how, though, it's different. Over here it is, wherefore says she, not she is unjust. And in this line it is, wherefore say not I that I am old. So let's take it step by step. One way to read this line, wherefore says she, not she is unjust. That would be one way of reading it, right? And again, you have to kind of adjust where you're going to put emphasis on the words. Although the emphasis is naturally supposed to fall on certain syllables, but where, for says, she not, she is unjust. That's where the emphasis is supposed to fall. But if we change that emphasis a little bit and read the lines as, but wherefore says she, not she is unjust. Suppose you were to pause right over here between the she and the not and emphasize the word not instead. Then the line would end up sounding like, but wherefore says she, not she is unjust. At any point does she claim that she's unjust? It's left as a question for us, right? It's left as a question. In other words, one of the ways that simple truth is suppressed is by not coming right out and saying, I am unjust to you, right? Is not saying something the same as lying? Is there a differentiation between withholding information and lying about it? Can you say the two things are exactly alike? And this question raises exactly that issue. And the mentality in this line is, I'm not lying because I'm just not saying what's obvious. So if I'm not saying what's obvious, you can't accuse me of lying, because not saying is not the same as actually lying. The next lines kind of torque that, right? They play kind of a little bit with that connotation, because the position of the not in this line is a little bit different. And wherefore say, not I, that I am old. Notice over here, I am old. Subject, verb, object. These three subject, verb, and object are kept together in this line, but not kept together over here, because again, not she. These two words, if you bundle those two words together, it's different than bundling these three words together. Over here, she may be saying that I never said that I'm unjust, and so therefore I'm not being unjust. In these lines, we may interpret it one way. Again, one possible interpretation is, wherefore say not I that I am old. So in other words, one way to interpret these lines is, haven't I always said that I'm old? In other words, if I've always said that I'm old, then you telling me that I'm young is not a lie on my part. I've always said that I'm old. It's not a lie on my part. It's you, right? It's you who are agreeing to this little bit of deception, right? You can call it self-deception, but I never said that I wasn't old. If you want to keep on giving me credit for being young, that's on you. And so there's an interesting dynamic here in these two lines. Again, I'm giving you one interpretation. There are other interpretations as well, but I'm giving you one. Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust. So this word habit has two different meanings as well. One is, of course, the habit of keeping trust, the habit of being trustworthy, right? And the other is this other meaning of the word habit. And remember, one of the things that I recommended to you was to go to the Oxford English Dictionary, OED.com. You need a subscription for this, but if you go to libraries.rutgers.edu, you as a Rutgers student are entitled to use the Oxford English Dictionary. You don't need to pay for a subscription. I'll give you the link on Blackboard so that you can do this. Another meaning of the word habit is dress. So the best way that love can dress itself up is in seeming trust. Okay? And so there's almost this idea that their love is like an act, right? Because it puts on clothes. And the clothes that their love puts on is the clothing that looks like it's trust. But it's seeming trust, right? Because an actor, whatever clothes an actor is wearing, they are not his clothes, right? We believe that they are his or her clothes, but they're not. It's just something that it's a costume that he or she puts on to make the act convincing. So there's that meaning. There's that meaning as well, this idea that habit is a kind of clothing or costume you put on whenever you're performing in front of somebody. And then there's this other meaning of the habit as we're normally used to interpreting it, which is the best habit, the best kind of regular conduct that love can have is the conduct of seeming trust. And again, seeming trust is not the same as actual trust. This word seeming is very important for understanding the poem. An age in love loves not to have years told. And again, not having years told gets us back to what earlier lines? My days are past the best, right? Here, he's old, right? And here, also, there's an idea of being aged. But in this case, it is he who is aged. And in this case, it is love. It is their love that's old. And it's not just their love that's old, it's age in love. In other words, they've been in this kind of relationship for quite some time. They've been going on and on like this, deceiving one another for quite some time. But again, just as people who are elderly don't want to be called elderly, so too a bad relationship that has been going on for many, many years loves not. It does not like to have that pointed out. Oh my God, you guys have been continuing like this for how many years? Age in love loves not to have years told. So here the years told, and here the years, my days are past the best, are a little bit different. By this point, the author has started talking about their relationship and not just about his role in their relationship. The last two lines, therefore I lie with her, and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be. And you'll notice repetition here as well. There's the lie over here and the lie over here. And there are, of course, two different meanings for this lie, right? He's, of course, lying to her, and she is lying to him. But there's also the fact that they're in love. And what do lovers do? They lie with one another, right? There's this idea of lying in bed with one another, right? And so both meanings of lie are here. Therefore, I lie with her and she with me. They lie every night in bed together, but they also lie to one another, as in they never tell one another the truth. And interestingly enough, they are happy this way. As a matter of fact, not only are they happy, but they're flattered. They're flattered. He is flattered into believing that he's young, not believing, he's flattered into being called young. She is flattered into being called truthful. And in this condition, through this kind of mutual flattery by lies, we can continue this relationship even in our faults. In other words, one of the things that allows this relationship to stay together is that we can see the faults in one another and lie about them, and that makes us feel good about ourselves. That is the thing that makes us feel good about ourselves. And hey, if you love yourself, it's easy to love someone else also, isn't it? And so the ultimate paradox comes in these two lines as well. So it's a fascinating poem. I'm going to open up a thread in Blackboard to hear your thoughts. Please tell me if you've got alternative interpretations. There are alternative interpretations. I'm looking forward to hearing that from you. And I'm looking forward also to hearing your thoughts about this. The quiz, remember, on these three poems is next Wednesday, and you'll have a chance to write a little bit about these poems and perhaps share some of your interpretations with me as well on that quiz. So I'll sign off for now. The very next lecture will be on Twelfth Night.